What's up, y'all? It's Chris here to talk about UFC 154, GSP versus Condit. Actually, just going to talk about that fight because let's be honest, outside of the co-main event, this card, no disrespect to the other fighters, is pretty weak, I guess, for lack of a better term. The co-main event looks cool, Martin Kampmann versus Johnny Hendricks, both guys on 3-fight win streaks. I don't know if this is necessarily like a number one contenders fight, because we don't know what Nick Diaz's status is when he comes back. And we don't know what's up for the winner of BJ Penn versus Rory McDonald, but the winner of this fight is definitely going to be near the top of the contenders list at welterweight. I favor Kampmann. I know Hendricks got the better wrestling, but outside of that, I think Kampmann's just a better overall fighter. And, Hendricks isn't the guy that always relies on wrestling. Plus, Kampmann's got some pretty solid takedown defense and submission skills, so go with Kampmann by decision. But as far as the main event, the fight that, I pretty much assume anyone who's tuning into this card is only tuning in mostly for this fight. It is the main attraction, the draw, so to speak. GSP versus Carlos Condit. It's going to be George's first time back in the cage in 19 months. Almost a 2-year stretch since he's been out, recovering most recently from that ACL surgery. So obviously it's going to be interesting to see, one, how time outside of the cage, ring rust, so to speak, affects him, but also how his body responds from such a significant injury. GSP is a very explosive fighter. That's seen in his wrestling and his takedowns, but that portion of his game more so than anything in his ACL. If anything, that would affect that part of his game. Also, you got to wonder how psychologically, GSP is a guy that ever since he got knocked out by Matt Serra, he's been thought of as a guy that is a little bit shaky psychologically. He's admitted going to sports psychologists himself, but I think we've seen it more so in just the way he fights ever since that first loss to Serra. He's not as willing to stand up and trade and just throw down and kick ass on the feet like he did before the Serra loss, particularly like the Dan Hardy fight and to a degree the Thiago Alves fight. He just kind of fights safe. I mean, he wins, he dominates his opponents, even on the feet like Koscheck and Jake Shields in his last couple of fights, but still doesn't really take the risks that he used to. So I think being out of the cage that long, that's another thing that he may have on his mind. You don't know if he's going to be 100% confident, even though he says he is. As for Condit, he's coming off that win over Nick Diaz, a fight that probably one of the fights that I've most anticipated as long as I've been an MMA fan. Given the fact that they're two of my current favorite fighters, Nick Diaz, number one. But man, what a disappointment in that fight, and it's mostly based on Condit's strategy. Now, it was successful. Obviously, he did get the win, and that did put him in the, give him the opportunity to get this shot against George St-Pierre. Now he's interim champ, so I can't fault his strategy even if I didn't like it. However, I don't think he's going to employ a similar strategy against GSP. I think he's a better stand-up fighter. I think if he would have been aggressive with Nick, it would have played right into Nick's hands. GSP, not so much. I think Condit should come out aggressively and really attack GSP at first, because if GSP does have any lingering doubts, psychologically, mentally, you really want to test him and see where his head's at. And Condit is an aggressive fighter, usually by nature. He's also a finisher. You look at his record, most of his wins are by finishes. He's a dangerous opponent. I think for GSP, coming off such a long stretch and, so many questions and uncertainty surrounding him, I think Carlos Condit is probably one of two guys outside of maybe Nick Diaz, the most dangerous or biggest threats to GSP at this moment. So, yeah, because I think Condit has the ability, maybe not with his hands, but not with one punch necessarily, although maybe he is capable of doing so. We saw him knock out Dan Hardy. But I do think he has the ability to knock out George St-Pierre, whether it would be with a knee, kicks, or, putting his punches together. Definitely has the ability to hurt George St-Pierre, I believe. As for GSP, I think he's a better boxer of these two. We saw him stick to the jab and just outbox guys like Shields and Koscheck in their second fight. I don't know if he'll be willing to stand and, stand as long against Carlos Condit, even though I think he can use that jab, which he's pretty much perfected as much as he can in MMA, to keep Condit at bay and outbox him. But he's always got to worry about Condit's strikes, particularly his kicks, coming at him. So I think George St-Pierre most likely is going to go to his bread and butter, his wrestling, his takedowns, top control. I don't think he's going to look to do it for all 5 rounds necessarily, but I think if at any time Carlos Condit is getting the advantage on the feet, George St-Pierre is going to go back to what works. And the wrestling / takedown defense still is the weakest part of Carlos Condit's game, so it is something he's vulnerable to. Although he's pretty solid off his back with submissions, attempts. I don't think he's going to submit George St-Pierre off his back, but I think he can hit him with maybe some elbows from the bottom, if nothing else. I don't think he's just going to lay there, give up like Dan Hardy did, if nothing else. As far as who do I pick in this one, I'd like to pick Carlos Condit to win this fight. I do think if this fight ends early, if it doesn't make it all the way, it's going to be because Carlos Condit was able to catch George St-Pierre, hurt him, and finish him off. If he hurts him, I definitely think he will finish him. However, perhaps I'm playing it safe in a way, but lest we forget that even though he's been gone for a long time, George St-Pierre was considered one of the top 2 or 3 fighters in the sport for the last couple of years. And if he's back as close to 100% as he can be, I think that he should win this fight. Whether he employs a strategy / style that I enjoy watching or not, that remains to be seen. But I think he can, hang on the feet long enough. And like I said, go for the takedowns and, work his top control game there en route to a decision. So I'll go with George St-Pierre by decision. But obviously I would not be shocked if Carlos Condit wins this fight. And if Carlos Condit does win this fight, I do think it will be by a stoppage. All right. I want to hear your thoughts on this fight. Who do you think is going to win? How do you think they're going to win? Who would you like to see win? Would you like to see George St-Pierre come back and, prove that he is one of the best in the sport? Or would you like to see Carlos Condit win and kind of shake up the division, a little bit? In a way, I want GSP to win because I still want to see the fight against Nick Diaz. I'd rather see that than a Condit Diaz rematch based on the way the first fight went. So, I don't know. Not saying that Diaz would get the next title shot, but I still really want to see the GSP Diaz matchup for obvious reasons. But I'm not really particularly rooting for him. I guess I'm rooting for Condit in this one. But even if I think that George St-Pierre is going to get the win. Anyways, like I said, what are your guys' thoughts on the fight? How do you think it's going to go down? And, who do you want to win? And all that other stuff. Talked about this fight and more on Your Science Finance Radio Show. Links to that and everything else Science Finance related, as well as my Twitter and the information part of the video as always. That's it for now. I'll be back Saturday night after the fight to talk about it. But until then, I'm out.